Hi, I'm James from Future Voices podcast. Today's episode is slightly different in that you won't see who I'm speaking with, but the person I'm talking to is an extraordinary young man who was exploited through county lines criminally for a number of years. I felt really privileged to be able to hear from Al what he feels that we can all do better in our work to safeguard young people. So, Al, from your point of view, when you hear the word exploitation, what does that mean for you?
Yeah, I mean, so the word exploitation straight away, my mind goes to quite a dark, not very pleasant place. I don't think there's any parts of exploitation that are pleasant. But obviously you've got two different forms of exploitation. So you've got criminal and you've got sexual. Now, both of these are absolutely horrific. And exploitation can really, really affect absolutely anyone. It's scary to admit, but I don't actually believe that we're in a world that everyone's safe from exploitation or being exploited, because it now currently comes in so many different forms. And that's what really scares me the most, because if you look at criminal exploitation, that covers quite a lot. It's a very broad word, but really what you've got in that is you've got money laundering, you've got sex trafficking, that also comes under sexual exploitation, but you've got weapons, you've got cybercrime, and all of these, and every type of crime usually has someone being exploited, someone that is being coerced into doing something against their will without not having a full understanding of what someone is actually trying to coerce them into. So yeah, hopefully that kind of summarises it.
Yeah, I think you've made a really important point that someone may see one type of harm or one type of exploitation, but what you're describing is that there can be multiple forms of harm or things going on for that person.
Yes, yeah, definitely. And I think also the real key point to make here as well is someone doesn't just wake up and they're not instantly exploited. It's quite a long, lengthy process. It always, most definitely always starts with some form of grooming. Someone will be in a really low point of their lives. They'll be in quite a vulnerable state. And just to make matters worse, someone then comes along and takes advantage of that vulnerable state, that breaking point sort of moment in their life. What I then actually find is even more sad, because not only have a lot of people that have been exploited got these massive, massive things going on in their lives, they then have someone come along, take advantage of that, and make that problem spiral completely out of anyone's control. And what I think exploiters do incredibly well is that they isolate the person being exploited, they alienate everyone around them. So that's even more of a dangerous point for someone to be in. Now, the sorts of exploitation that I'm particularly looking at are young people being exploited. Now, that is even more harder, in my personal opinion, because young people are easily led at the best of times. That isn't just a statement being thrown out there. That is fact. Young people's brains are not as developed as an adult or anything like that. And we are incredibly easy to be taken along on a journey, so to speak, without really understanding the repercussions for this or understanding the long-term impacts. And exploiters really know that. What again brings me back to why it's so sickening.
So, Al, you mentioned earlier about exploiters taking advantage of someone when they're at that lowest point. But sometimes, certainly what I've seen is that people may not see that as it being taken advantage of, that they may see someone doing something positive or good for them. Is that how that can start?
Yes, and that is exactly grooming, what you've kind of explained there, to be honest with you. You're so right, because grooming is almost a process of brainwashing, right? So it starts off very slightly. It's really hard to notice. The exploiter will come across with the best, utmost, greatest intentions for the person that they are targeting. And this is why it's so challenging for professionals to work with young people. Because from an outside perspective, anyone can see what's going on. It's point blank. But when you're caught up in those scenarios, in that sort of environment, with this person that you really believe you can trust and that they've got their best interest at heart, you just believe everyone around you is simply trying to ruin that opportunity for you. As a young person, you think, oh, these adults, they don't want to help me. They're just saying that this person's bad for me because they don't know no better. They're old and they don't understand what it's like growing up in this world and all of this and that. And the exploiter will be there going, yes, you're 100% right. These old farts are just trying to ruin your life. These old people, they don't want the best for you. And what you then find is a young person or anyone being exploited stuck in the middle, right? And that is the worst position for someone that's being groomed, having the people that generally really want the best interest for that individual and in the person that is just betraying the best interest. Now, the reason why that is so difficult in itself is because when someone is trying to groom you, exploit you, they will throw everything at you that you want to see. They will say everything you want to hear. Now, when people have your best intentions at heart, quite often they will be brutally honest. They are going to go straight to the point. They're not going to try buttering you up around it because they just want you to be able to see right there, right then, that it's all bad and this bad news from the exploiter. So it's a battle. It's a real big battle and it's really, really challenging. So hopefully that begins to answer your question.
No, it does, absolutely. I think that was something about how, I suppose the question for people listening are often asking themselves is how do we help? How do we have that? Where do we start when we're worried about someone that might be being groomed or being exploited?
Yeah. So that is such a vital and important question, to be honest, because now what you've really got to show them is that same love and compassion and time that the exploiter is giving them. Now, what you've really got to remember is someone that's part of an organised crime group, an OCG, or someone that is actively going out to exploit people from a criminal point of view. They have got all the time in the world. They're not doing legitimate jobs. They're quite often not the family man taking care of the kids at home and stuff like that. So they've got all of this time as an exploiter to dedicate it to the person they're trying to exploit. So as a professional or someone that has truly got the best interests at heart of a young person or someone they believe is vulnerable, you've got to give them that same level of time, same level of compassion, and patience is your biggest card to play with someone that is being exploited, because it's incredibly frustrating, really, really is, for absolutely everyone involved, even the person being exploited, the people trying to get them out of that situation, even the exploiter itself. And what it really is, it's a test of time, essentially. Things aren't going to change overnight, but if you are consistently there for someone that you believe have been exploited and consistently giving them opportunities and what I like to call fire exits out of their situation, then the chances are that you will have a happy ending, because the chances are that the person exploiting, the young person, the adult, whatever it might be, they're going to have some sort of complications at some point. You know, a criminal business is a very chaotic business. They've got risk of going to prison, risk of being injured, you know, and business can be fairly easily disrupted. All it takes is for them to have a bad day. And that is where, as professionals, parents, carers, whatever it might be, that is where you then swoop in with a solid plan of action when that exploiter isn't there. But it's about knowing the individual you're trying to help, being able to spot those telltale signs, because what might happen, this is just an example that I've completely made up, but you might notice that your son or daughter is constantly in and out of the house, constantly going missing, and then all of a sudden they have a day or two where that phone isn't ringing anymore, where they're not being told to go and meet whoever or being forced to go and do whatever. And quite often what's happened in that period is the exploiter has been arrested for a criminal offence. So you've got about a 24-hour period where that person is not being contacted by the exploiter. And that essentially means that the exploiter is not inside their head. So that is, and again, things aren't going to magically be fixed just because someone's been arrested and taken out of that situation. But you have then got the opportunity to start building those foundations on, well, do you want to go on holiday in a month's time? Or do you want to go and do this? Or there's a new job coming up. And just for that split second, they might go to that job interview. And that might be the beginning of their journey towards something positive. Again, the exploiter will come back into that relationship, into that person's lives. But if those foundations, for example, they've got a job, then that job will give you such a massive distraction. They're going to feel the need to, go and please their boss or whatever it might be. And then it might even give them a sense of purpose. Because what I've identified, again, this isn't major data to back it up, but from speaking to many different people across the country that have been exploited through county lines and different ways like that, most of them simply haven't got a purpose. They don't understand what life is about. Now, if you give a young person a purpose, you give them a sense of belonging, and you show them the real gems of the world, the simple things that most young people that are being exploited don't have, then they realise that there's a better life out there, and they will most likely want that better life, and they will start taking the right steps with the right guidance towards actually getting out of that relationship. So that's kind of what we can all do. Sorry, I've rambled on a little bit.
No, you said a lot, and every time I speak to you, it's inspiring what you talk about. And going back to what you said initially, I suppose that first bit you were saying was about the time and what that means in terms of the influence. So there's something about the time that the exploiter has, and has access to the young person, and how do we try and counter that? So what do we need to do, either as individuals or as multi-agency groups, to try and increase our ability to have those relationships with young people, to try and counter some of the influence that the exploiters are having? But I think there's something else that you said there as well, which is that there needs to be a decent plan. Like, what is it that, if we're coming out, because you mentioned about purpose for young people, but there's something also about what's the purpose of why we're coming out. So what are we coming out to do? And you saying about, that time that you can sort of swoop in, and thinking about not just how to stop things that may be assessed as a risk or as harm, but to think with that young person about what might be an alternative way to have that sense of purpose, or to achieve and be successful in a way where they're not also harmed. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, yeah. So spot on. Exactly that. You've worded that incredibly well. Yeah. And just to add on a little bit to that as well, because you're right, there've got to be that real plan and time, exactly what we're just saying. And I've got a couple of examples for you. So a youth justice worker, for example, will get assigned a young person, and usually that's for about a 6 to 10 week radius, right? So the main issue that you've got there, because youth justice workers are essential against this fight against exploitation, but by the time that relationship has actually started to be built, that youth justice worker is then withdrawn. And essentially what really needs to happen there is you need to start off by just seeing a young person maybe once a week, once every other week, very slow, gradual beginning of that
Mm.
relationship. And then after about 4 weeks to 6 weeks of seeing each other very briefly, getting to know each other, knowing that they're going to stick around, then start thinking about doing a 6 to 8 week, very intense, giving that person all the time in the world. Because relationships also take time to build. People aren't going to come out of, again, a county line situation where people are constantly trying to rob them, where the police are constantly trying to arrest them. They're in that fight or flight constantly. And then you've got a youth justice worker come into their lives and they're instantly meant to trust each other. That's not going to happen. It needs to be more of a gradual process. And then also just something else that I wanted to add on to when I talk about opportunities. Now, some of the main things that I'm really passionate about when it comes to opportunities is everybody has got a hobby, right? So everyone has something that they enjoy doing. Now, for some people, they do simply enjoy running a business, having a cash flow business, seeing that cash every single day, or taking the responsibility of bagging up drugs and selling drugs, although they're not benefiting and it is them still being groomed. But you can take these exact concepts and you can put them into a legitimate form with the right people around you. Anyone can start up a business these days with the right people around you, and you can take these business models like county lines and you can turn them into something legitimate. Because a county line's business model is the exact same as any other business model, right? You've got a demand, so what do? You meet the demand with the supply. You then make sure that you've got a custom to make sure that you're meeting the demand, you're making sure that your profit margins are right and everything like that. But you can take that concept and put it in something legitimate. And that is the biggest issue that we've got, is a lot of young people that are involved in county lines, they think, well, no, because then I've got to answer to a boss if I go legit, and I'm going to have people trying to, tell me I've got to do things this way, that way. But if we just make them their own bosses and give them that sense of purpose, that sense of belonging, and put the ownership into their own hands to do something right with that knowledge that they've been taught in a wrong way, the outcome is absolutely incredible. I've personally spoken to quite a few people that were heavily involved in selling drugs. And their business skills are phenomenal. You can't even teach it in university. And they're now running extremely successful businesses. And the reason why that happened was because someone gave them the time of day. Someone gave them those opportunities and someone gave them a platform to skyrocket all those ideas that they thought were silly into something meaningful, something purposeful. And that's all we've got to do. I know I make it sound really simple because it's not.
I know the first time I met you, and you and I talked about language earlier, so I'll try and get this right. But I remember you saying some people are natural born hustlers. They can sell stuff, and you gave a really good example about that. There'll be some people that. What was the example that you gave where you were saying some people like to mix stuff up and they can go and work in precious metals, and someone else can go and work in? Do you remember?
Yes, I remember, and it's one of my favourite examples. So when you have precious metals, like gold, for example, it's a great example. So when you have gold, you have 24 karat gold, you have 18 karat gold, you have 14 karat gold, and you have 9 karat gold, right? And really what that is so that everyone can afford gold. You're not getting the same quality, you're not getting the same amount, essentially. But when you buy drugs, it's the exact same thing. People are cutting the drugs to make sure that everyone can afford it, essentially. You're melting it down like gold, you're adding whatever it might be to it to bulk it up, and then you're going out to sell it. And anyone can do that with precious metals, you can buy that 9 karat gold and you can then go and sell it at a markup value, because that is one of those industries that has never really been affected by inflation or anything like that. And it's the same with cocaine. cocaine and gold really aren't that different. And it just proves that you can take an illegal concept and turn it into a legal one, is the whole point of that. So
There's something for people listening around when we are working with young people about how we're working to identify or help young people identify their skills, and those skills might be skills that they are learning in situations that are also harmful or that we may also be worried about, but we also want to make sure that we have that that we're also alert to some of the positive things that might be taking place as well.
yes, yeah, and I'm so glad you said that, James, because it's so true. Now, what I'd encourage anyone listening to do that's working with young people that they believe are being exploited through a drug dealing network or a county line network is actually sit there and do something called drugs maths with them. Okay, you will be absolutely blown away. You ask them how many grams are in a kilo. You ask them how you can make the most amount of profit out of a single gram, how to do those profit margins, and you will simply be blown away. Now, that is your job as a professional to then go, wait a minute, let's take that exact concept and instead of cocaine, heroin, crack, whatever it might be, let's look at something else you can do that with. Do you want to set up a sweet business? Do you want to set up a gold business? Do you want to do something that works off grams and is incredibly easy, transferable skills? And that is our job to enhance them, essentially.
It's a great it's a great analogy or a great description of how we can think about that direct conversation. But one of the things I was thinking about actually is quite often when I'm talking to people, they're like, yeah, but this young person doesn't want to speak to me. So how, like, what do I do in that situation? And I was thinking, like, when you and I were talking, I think you'd said that you were about 12 or 13 initially. And I'm thinking, like, back at that point, what would it have been that people might have been able to do, or that you might have needed to see from people?
Yeah. So there's a couple of different ways to answer this. So where I actually started, what might come as a bit of a surprise to you, when I was in year 7, I started up by selling bubblegum in my school, right? I absolutely love selling bubblegum. I love the business of it. I love the business model and everything like that. But I was quickly told by the school what I was doing was not right at all. I wasn't allowed to sell sweets in school. I wasn't allowed to be making money in school. And yes, I completely get that. But what happened was that left me vulnerable to exploiters because they were then able to see that I was essentially able to take a product and sell it to people. That is exactly what exploiters are trying to say. So the short answer to your question is what someone could have came along and done when I was in year 7 is spotted the legitimate great potential that I had in being able to take a product and to sell it at a profit. So all it really would have taken is for that teacher to say, look, school is not the appropriate place to be doing this, but let's look at other ways that you could be doing it. Like my mum and dad, they knew I was saying these bubblegum in school. They were very supportive of it. They thought this is a great initiative. You're trying to go out there, earn your own money. And the second that the school said to them, look, this isn't okay, your son shouldn't be trying to make money at this sort of age, everyone shut that idea down. But that hunger for making money never left. So very quickly left me in extremely vulnerable situations. And even as well, some of the other things that professionals should have been looking out for is I had a lot of personal situations going on in my life. So my dad having cancer, and my granddad also having cancer, and we had a lot of family disruption at the time. And again, I was really honest with the school about what was going on, what the effects of this was really happening. But But the main barrier I really found, and forgive me for anyone that's listening, but a lot of these teachers I was trying to talk to were borderline retirement. They were, 60, 65 years old, and they very much had that still stigma of man up, grow up, these things happen, and you just got to keep powering on, and no sympathy whatsoever. But then again, instantly made me alienated. I didn't feel like I could go and talk to those teachers anymore about when things were going on. So all that would have taken was for a slightly younger teacher that showed me a little bit of compassion with slightly more of a modern mindset, and things would have been different for me. I would have gone to those teachers like I already had my whole entire life when things were going wrong. But because I got such a blunt and negative response, I then didn't feel like I could speak to professionals anymore. I didn't feel like they could relate to me. I didn't feel like they understood in any shape or form. And to be honest, I didn't even feel like they really cared either. Was a massive, massive part to play in why young people get exploited, because I then went out looking for someone to show me a little bit of compassion, a little bit of responsibility and welcoming and all of this. So that's the main takeaway from that, really, is show people compassion and kind of see where it could lead to.
That's really powerful. I think when we were talking, I know you'd mentioned to me about feeling, if I say something at this point, and you worked yourself up to say something, and you were thinking that you'd get a response that people would help, and that wasn't what you got. And what you're describing is the impact that had was actually to increase the situation for you.
Yes, yeah, without a doubt, 100%. And and I do just think things could have easily been avoided for me if I had that right mentor in my life, that person showing me the correct opportunities. And this is why I am so passionate about opportunities and seeing the potential in young people. Everyone has a potential. Everyone has a potential to do good and a potential to do bad. Now, I'm a really, really strong believer that you are a product of your environment. When someone's telling you every single day that you're to be a druggie, that you're to be a drug dealer, that you're doing bad things, you become that person. That was very much the case for me, because at a very young age, I started smoking weed, and I've grown up in a very middle-class family. We never really openly spoke about drugs. My mum and dad have never ever taken drugs in their life. They didn't understand the need to educate me on drugs because they'd never been put in a situation where drugs are even being taken. So when I then got to upper school, very confused with all these family situations going on, people were offering me joints and to smoke weed, didn't really understand what I was doing. And the school was just constantly going, oh, you're a druggie, you hang around with drug dealers, you're going to be a drug dealer. They used to quite often call me weak and worthless. And it's so true what they say, that negative language is so, so damaging. Because I thought, well, I've got no other options here. Everyone thinks I'm a scum. Everyone thinks I'm worthless. So I might as well be worthless. Might as well. What have I got to lose by hanging around with these people? So that's exactly what I'd done. And it put me in these horrendous situations. But I didn't feel like I had any better purpose to fill. I genuinely believed that these teachers were right. I'd been brought up in a world that we respect our teachers, we respect the police, and if the teachers and the police say something, well, that's got to be right, because they're the ones that are hierarchy and they're the ones that have got all this wealth of experience. And I really, really, truly believed that. I thought, well, you know what? I might just have to accept my fate here, to be fair. Everyone thinks I'm worthless. The people that are giving me any sort of opportunities aren't the best sort of people. So I just went along with it, essentially.